Generally speaking, all the great events have been distorted, most of the important causes concealed, some of the principal characters never appeared, and all who figure are so misunderstood and misrepresented that the result is a complete mystification. So, who is a so-called black man? And what is the so-called black man? And where does the so-called black man come from? Africa? Asia? Europe? Or America? According to mainstream history, there are no connections with the New World, quote unquote, to the continents prior to the expedition of Columbus in 1492, and each one of the major civilizations of antiquity grew individually, and in the case of the Americas, in complete isolation. Okay, let's just say for the sake of conversation, history in the way you think you know it is a lie. Or at the very least, a construct used for political and financial gain. I bet your first question would be, what would be the purpose for the lies? And who will be responsible for such action? As crazy as this may sound, there may be some truth to this idea. For centuries, scholars, astrologers, and historians alike have combed through the annals of history to better understand the origins of man. But on this search, many credible minds have discovered discrepancies, if not blatant lies, in our modern chronology. From John Hardwin to Sir Isaac Newton, to more recently Anatoly Fomenko, one thing could be said: history is written by victors. Reading from The Medieval Empire of the Israelites by Robert Grisham and Vladimir Melamed. In William Shakespeare's tragedy, Othello, there is a riddle. What religion does Othello profess? Desdemona says directly, "By heaven, you do me wrong, as I am a Christian." But here the frank and honest Othello seems to be hiding something. It is assumed today that he, a black-skinned Moor, must be a Muslim, or at the least a descendant of Muslims. According to traditional history, there really is no other alternative. Othello, before he ends his life in suicide, recalls and says besides that in Aleppo once, where a malignant and a turbaned Turk beat a Venetian, introduced the state, and I took by the throat the circumcised dog, and smote him thus, and stabs himself. That is, according to contemporary ideas, Islam must already have been in the world, since some kind of circumcised dog and a turban have fought with the Venetian in Aleppo. Meanwhile, still rather recently, in historical time, the military personnel of many countries have worn turbans, and circumcision, as it will be shown in our book, it is most complex phenomenon, one characteristic of a definite stage in all of human culture. Thus, it is impossible to understand who Othello is in terms of faith, and is not clear why he calls the Turk a dog. But it is not worth accusing Shakespeare of a mistake. Not only he, but also the English in general up to the 17th century did not mention anywhere in written sources the words Muslim, Islam, Quran, minaret, muezzin, hijra, Kaaba. The full significance of this is that they did not know anything of them. But, as you know, the sons of Albion had already visited the corners of the globe and would have known of these if they had existed. These words clearly were unknown to Shakespeare, as well as to both Francis Bacon and other great Englishmen of that era. It goes on to read, scientific facts are collected and that prove that, up until now, the predominant historical conception has been utopian. It was built on false premises by means of an artificially constructed chronology. A multitude of evidence points to the fact that all ancient manuscripts are literary works of the 15th and 16th centuries, and that there was never in reality any ancient Rome and Greece, as history teaches us. We have collected the conclusions of dozens of scientists from various countries that most ancient monuments of mankind, the pyramids of Egypt, were erected in the periods between the 11th and 18th centuries of our own era. Okay, so let's recap. Othello, a Moor, a black man, yes. Just in case you ain't know, Othello was a Moorish prince. So basically by default, he was a Muslim. Now the fact that common terms like Muslim, Islam, Quran, Kaaba haven't been used before the 15th century is a red flag. According to generally accepted history, historians would mark the founding of the Islamic faith somewhere around the 6th or 7th century. But according to the etymology of the words themselves, they can't be found anytime before 1550. Now, the reason that this is a problem because this would bring a few things into question. For an example, if we can't verify any of these words themselves predate before the 15th century, that brings into question every bit of history before that point. For me at least. Why? Because in 1492, another important year in world history, is when the Emirate of Granada fell. And that's the last Muslim, or whatever they're considering these people, kingdom. Now at this point, the Catholic mafia started setting up fronts in France, Germany, and if you think about it, America. Alberto Rivera, a Jesuit, remember that for later, was a Catholic priest and also a whistleblower. His testimony could actually shed some light on this topic. He revealed things he learned during his training to become a Jesuit. In his tell-all series, The Prophet, he reveals that it was actually the Catholic Church that was behind the creation of the faith of Muhammad and the spreading of it to usurp the Holy Land from the Jews. Quote, The Prophet, Part 6. The Vatican desperately wanted Jerusalem because of its religious significance, but was blocked by the Jews. Another problem was the true Christians in North Africa preaching the gospel. Roman Catholicism was growing in power and would not tolerate any opposition. Somehow the Vatican had to create a weapon to eliminate both the Jews and the true Christian believers who refused to accept Roman Catholicism. Looking to North Africa, they saw the multitude of Arabs as a source of manpower to do their dirty work. A number of Arabs had become Roman Catholic and could be used in reporting information to their leaders in Rome. Others could be used as a fifth column, an underground spy network, to carry out Rome's master plan to control the great multitudes of Arabs who had completely rejected Roman Catholicism. When St. Augustine appeared on the scene, he knew what was going on. Augustine was very powerful and influential man with his own small army of followers. His monastery served as bases to seek out and destroy Bible manuscripts owned by the true Christians. Augustine was made a saint for faithfully serving his mother church. The Vatican wanted to create a messiah for the Arabs, someone they could raise up as a great leader, a man with charisma, one they could train and eventually unite all the non-Catholic Arabs behind him, creating a mighty army that will ultimately capture Jerusalem for the Pope.
Возьмите вот это вот. Значит, это знаменитая, так называемая Пейтингерова карта, считается созданной в античном Риме во II веке нашей эры. Это такое длинное полотнище, на котором изображен мир античный, считается на эпоху II века нашей эры. Вот так это выглядит. Это все вытянуто. Раньше моря рисовали в виде рек. Поэтому вся Евразия вместо квадратного изображения превратилась вот в такую, в полосочку. А вот в центре, вон там помечен маркер, в центре Стамбул, проливы, вот там, где вот стоит такая желтая, видна желтая метка. Там Стамбул. Вот мы говорили с вами о Йоросе, о Бейкосе. И вот там, на месте Бейкоса, где на современных картах написан город Бейкос, стоит совсем другое название. Называется Хрисополь, то есть город Христа. Это есть такое косвенное подтверждение того факта, что эта карта, она, конечно, сделана не в II веке нашей эры, а где-то в веке в XVI нашей эре. Люди еще помнили многие из подлинных старых названий. Потому что потом вот можете подойти и увидеть, повторяю, на месте горы Бейкос, город Хрисополь, то есть город Христа.
Okay, so that was Anatoly Fomenko, a respected philologist, mathematician, and topology. Basically, what he just said was the Pinkerton map, which is dated somewhere around the 2nd century AD, allegedly, is basically fake. You can tell this because the name Christopolis was given to the city in the Middle Ages. So that would leave you to question, how would that name be on a map from the 2nd century? This really isn't a one-off thing either. From Giorgio Vasari's The Life of the Artist, he says, in 1496, Michelangelo carved a sculpture of a sleeping Cupid and sold it to art dealer Baldassari, who buried it in his vineyard in order to age it. That way, it would increase its value. The idea for a need to revise chronology isn't necessarily a new one at all. In fact, one of the more serious attempts to re-examine the accepted timeline was undertaken by a renowned mathematician, astronomer, and theologian, Sir Isaac Newton. In his posthumous work, The Chronology of Ancient Kingdoms Amended, he moves the most historical events before the supposed time of Alexander the Great forward. Why? He too also believed that most ancient manuscripts after the advent of the printing press in 1436 were doctored, if not fabricated altogether. The Chronology of Ancient Kingdoms Amended provides a detailed argument using astronomical evidence to show that Scaliger and Petavius had erroneously created entire periods of Babylonian, Egyptian, and Greek history that never actually occurred. He accomplished this by utilizing an astronomical dating technique that had never been used before that time. Scholars before had been using astronomy to settle chronology since Mercator, but none before Newton had thought to use the precession of the equinox to settle dates. Another to challenge the modern chronology would be Jean Hardouin, a theologian, also a Jesuit. Why they keep coming up? Anyway, he was a highly revered antiquarian scholar of his time. In 1963, he wrote on coins from the Herodian dynasty. Hardwin hinted that he was on the cusp of uncovering a great conspiracy. He stated that he had begun to, quote, sense fraud in Augustine and his contemporaries, quote unquote. Didn't Alberto Rivera, the Jesuit, say the same thing? From Prolegomena on the censorship of the writers of antiquity, it is my intention, Hardwin wrote, to show that all writings which are commonly thought to be old are in fact suppositions and the fabrication of an unprincipled crew of literary men. In brief, Hardwin believed that the works of antiquity, including both the writings of many Greek and Roman authors, as well as the texts of the church fathers, had been fabricated by a secret cabal of atheists in the 14th century. So, let me ask a question. What does anything we just went over got anything to do with Black history? And who are the Jesuits? And who overthrew the Moors in Europe? And why are they lying about our history?